The Apache woman over 2 meters tall. No man could handle her. Until a rancher came, the land was wide and quiet, stretching far beyond what the eye could easily measure. Dry wind moved across the desert grass, bending it gently, as if the earth itself was breathing. This was a place where people lived close to nature, where strength was not shown by words but by endurance. In this land lived an Apache woman unlike anyone else around her. She was over 2 meters tall. When she stood still, she looked like part of the mountains behind her, solid, calm, unmovable. People noticed her the moment she entered a space. Some felt nervous, some felt curious. Most felt uncomfortable, even though they could not explain why. It was not just her height. It was the way she carried herself, straight-backed, steady-eyed, as if she had learned long ago not to shrink for anyone. From childhood, she had been different. As a young girl, she grew faster than others. Her hands were bigger, her steps longer, her presence impossible to ignore. Elders would whisper that she was strong like the old ones, while others simply stared. She learned early that being seen too much could be just as lonely as being ignored. Her family had taught her the old ways: respect for land, silence when words were unnecessary, and dignity even when misunderstood. Her mother used to say that strength was not about proving anything. It was about standing firm when the world tried to push you aside. Those words stayed with her, especially after her mother passed away, leaving her to face life mostly on her own. She worked wherever work was available. Sometimes it was physical labor, sometimes long hours under the sun. She never complained. Her strength made tasks easier, but it also made people uneasy. Men often avoided working beside her. Some felt embarrassed when she lifted more than they could. Others tried to joke, but their jokes were thin masks over discomfort. She did not respond. She had learned that silence protected her better than anger ever could. In the small nearby town, stories followed her like dust. People said she was too much, too tall, too strong, too quiet, too independent. Some said no man could ever handle her. The words were said casually, as if describing weather, but they carried weight. She heard them. She always heard them. She did not hate men, nor did she seek their approval. Still, there were moments, late at night, when the wind howled across the plains, when loneliness settled beside her like a shadow. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being unseen for who she truly was. When she walked into a store, conversations paused. When she passed by on the road, eyes followed. Children stared openly, unafraid, until parents gently pulled them away. She did not blame the children. Curiosity was natural. Fear was learned. Despite everything, she lived with purpose. She woke before sunrise, worked until the sky turned orange, and returned home tired but honest. Her home was simple, nothing unnecessary, everything earned. The walls held memories, not decorations. A pair of old boots near the door. Tools hung neatly where she could reach them. A quiet place where she could breathe. The land respected her. Animals sensed her calm and did not startle easily. Horses especially trusted her. She never forced them. She moved slowly, spoke softly, and waited. That patience was part of her strength, though few noticed. The town nearby relied on the land for survival, but not everyone respected it. Some people came and went, chasing quick success, leaving damage behind. She watched quietly, knowing the land remembered everything. She believed that people, like land, revealed their truth over time. Men tried sometimes. A few approached her with confidence that quickly turned into insecurity. They stood close, tried to appear taller, spoke louder than necessary. Some made comments they thought were harmless. Others tested her strength like it was a challenge. She shut those doors gently but firmly. She was not interested in proving anything. There were others who admired her from a distance but never stepped forward. They believed the stories. They believed she was unapproachable, unmanageable, too strong for anyone to stand beside. The idea that strength could exist without conflict was something they did not understand. As time passed, she accepted that this was her life. She found peace in routine, in sunrise and sunset, in the steady rhythm of work. She did not wait for change. She did not expect anyone to arrive and see her clearly. Hope, she believed, was dangerous when it depended on others. One afternoon, as the heat softened and the sky widened, she traveled to town for supplies. Dust followed her steps as she entered the small store. The familiar silence fell. She nodded politely to the clerk and began gathering what she needed. Her movements were efficient, practiced. That was when someone new stood near the counter. He was a rancher, recently arrived, though she did not know that yet. His clothes were worn from work, his hands marked by labor. He looked tired but grounded, like someone who understood the land rather than fought it. When he noticed her, he did not stare. He did not look away either. He simply acknowledged her presence with a calm nod, as if seeing a tall woman was no different from seeing anyone else. It was such a small moment that it almost went unnoticed. Almost. She felt it, though she did not show it. For the first time in a long while, someone did not react to her size. He did not measure himself against her. He did not joke. He did not seem threatened. They did not speak. Not yet. She paid for her supplies and left, the bell above the door ringing softly behind her. Outside, the wind moved again, carrying dust across the road. She loaded her truck and drove away, unaware that this brief moment would linger in both their minds longer than expected. Back at her home, she went about her evening as usual, but something was different, not dramatic, not sudden. Just a slight shift, like the earth settling after a long time. She reminded herself not to imagine meaning where there was none. People pass through all the time, most left without consequence. Still, that simple nod replayed in her thoughts, not because it promised anything, but because it offered something rare, normalcy. As night fell, stars filled the sky, wide and countless. She sat outside for a while, listening to the land breathe. She had learned not to expect understanding from the world. Yet, somewhere beyond her quiet routine, a path had begun to form, slowly, naturally, without force. She did not know it yet, but the life she believed was fixed was about to change. Not because someone came to handle her, but because someone might finally choose to stand beside her. And for the first time in a long while, the future felt open rather than closed. The next few days passed quietly, but the memory of that brief moment at the store stayed with both of them. For her, life continued as usual. She woke early, worked the land, fixed what needed fixing, and kept her thoughts to herself. Yet now and then, without wanting to, her mind returned to the calm nod from the stranger. It had not been dramatic, but it had been different. Different enough to be noticed. For the rancher, the land was still new. He had recently taken over a stretch of property not far from town. The ranch was old, worn down by years of hard use and neglect. Fences leaned at strange angles. Gates creaked. The soil was stubborn, as if testing him, asking whether he was serious about staying. He worked long hours, learning the land little by little, respecting its limits. He believed that land, like people, responded better to patience than force. He had noticed the tall woman immediately that day in the store. Not because she stood out, though she did, but because of how others reacted to her. The silence, the side glances, the discomfort. He had seen that look before, used on people who did not fit into easy boxes. He had learned through his own life that such looks often said more about the one staring than the one being stared at. He wondered about her briefly, then pushed the thought aside. Life on a ranch left little room for curiosity. There was always work waiting. 2 mornings later, trouble came without warning. A section of fence along the far edge of his property had collapsed during the night. Whether it was the wind, old wood finally giving up, or something else, he did not know. What he did know was that several cattle had wandered off, following instinct more than boundaries. He tracked them by hoof marks across the dry ground. The trail led farther than he expected, toward land that bordered hers. He followed, calling softly, moving carefully so as not to startle them further. That was when he saw her again. She was already there. She stood near a small group of cattle, calm as stone, guiding them slowly with careful movements. Her voice was low, steady, almost soothing. The animals responded to her, turning where she directed them, easing back toward the broken fence line. The rancher stopped a short distance away, watching. He did not interrupt. He could see she knew exactly what she was doing. Her size did not make her movements rough. In fact, they were gentle, controlled, precise. When the last animal moved past her, she turned and noticed him. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the open land stretching between them. "You've got a fence down," she said calmly. Her voice matched her presence, steady, direct, without unnecessary softness or sharpness. "I do," he replied. "I appreciate the help." She nodded once as if acknowledgement was enough. She did not wait for thanks or praise. She simply turned and began walking back toward her side of the land. "If you want," he said, raising his voice slightly so the wind wouldn't steal his words, "I could use an extra set of hands fixing it." She paused. For a moment, he wondered if he had crossed a line. People often made assumptions about her time, her willingness, her strength. He waited, not pushing. Finally, she turned back. "I can help for a bit," she said, "but I work my way." "That's fine," he answered. "So do I." They walked together toward the damaged fence. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the kind that allowed space for thought. As they worked, he noticed how naturally she handled the tools. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation. She lifted heavy posts with ease, but never in a way that showed off. She focused on the task, not on who was watching. He worked beside her, matching her pace. He did not rush her. He did not slow her down. They found a rhythm without discussion. Occasionally, she pointed something out, a better angle, a weak joint, a place where the ground would not hold unless reinforced. He listened. He adjusted. He respected her knowledge without question. That was new for her. Most people either ignored her advice or treated it like a challenge. This man simply accepted it as useful information, nothing more, nothing less. As the sun climbed higher, sweat gathered and muscles ached. Still, neither complained. They worked until the fence stood solid again, stronger than before. When they finished, he stepped back and looked at the line. "That should hold," he said. "It will," she replied. He offered her water. She accepted without hesitation. No awkwardness, no forced politeness. They sat for a short while, resting in the shade of a nearby tree. The land was quiet except for distant wind. "You've been here a long time," he said, not as a question but an observation. "All my life," she answered. He nodded. "It shows you know this land." She glanced at him briefly, studying his face, his posture. He was not trying to impress her. He was not filling the silence with unnecessary words. He seemed comfortable just being there. "You're new," she said. "Relatively," he replied. "I plan to stay." That caught her attention. Many came with plans. Few stayed long enough to mean it. They spoke a little more after that. Simple things, weather, water levels, the way the land changed through the year. He did not ask personal questions. She did not volunteer details. Yet something steady formed between them, like the first layer of stone in a foundation. When it was time to leave, she stood. "If another fence goes down, you know where to find me," she said. "I do," he answered. "And if you ever need help, the offer goes both ways." She nodded and walked away, her long steps carrying her back across the open ground. For the rest of the day, the rancher worked with a different kind of focus. Not distracted, but thoughtful. He replayed their conversation, not searching for meaning, but recognizing something rare, ease. For her, the encounter lingered as well. She returned to her routine, but the day felt lighter. Not because someone had saved her or changed her life, but because someone had treated her strength as normal. That night, as the sky darkened and stars appeared one by one, she sat outside again. The land was quiet. The world felt wide. She did not allow herself to hope. Not yet, but she allowed herself to acknowledge something new had begun, not loudly, not suddenly, but steadily. Two people, one land, no need to prove anything. And somewhere between broken fences and shared silence, trust had taken its first breath. After that day by the fence, life continued, but it no longer felt quite the same. The land was still the land. The work was still hard. The sun still rose and set in its own time. Yet something steady had been added to the rhythm of her days, something quiet but noticeable. They did not see each other every day. In fact, several days passed without any meeting at all. Still, the knowledge that someone nearby understood the land the way she did made the wide spaces feel less empty. Not smaller, just shared. One morning, clouds gathered early, heavy and dark. The wind shifted, carrying the sharp smell of rain. Storms were common, but this one felt stronger than most. She secured what she could, checking tools, gates, and shelters. She moved with purpose, aware that the land demanded respect during weather like this. Across the open stretch of land, the rancher was doing the same. He had learned quickly that preparation mattered more than strength. As the wind picked up, he noticed movement near the far end of his property. A group of horses had grown restless, sensing the coming storm. One young horse, still learning, pulled away from the group and bolted toward open ground. Without hesitation, he went after it. The rain came faster than expected. Wind whipped across the land, blurring distance and sound. He followed the tracks until they led toward familiar ground, hers. She heard the storm before she saw it. Thunder rolled low and rain struck the earth hard, flattening dust into mud. Then she saw the horse, moving too fast, fear guiding its steps. Behind it, the rancher followed, careful but determined. She did not hesitate. She positioned herself ahead of the horse, not blocking its path but guiding it, turning her body at the right moment, using presence rather than force. She spoke softly, steady words carried by the wind. The horse slowed, confused but no longer panicked. Together they guided it toward shelter. When the storm finally broke into heavy rain, they stood side by side beneath cover, water dripping from their clothes, breath steadying. "That could have gone badly," he said. "But it didn't," she replied. They stayed there until the storm eased, watching rain fall across the land. There was no rush to speak. Silence had become something they both trusted. After that day, working together became more natural. Sometimes it was planned. Other times it happened without words. A gate left open, a tool needed fixing, an animal needing care. They showed up for each other without announcement. People in town began to notice. It started with looks, then whispers. The tall Apache woman and the new rancher, working together, talking. Standing side by side like equals. Some people were curious, others were uncomfortable. Old ideas do not change easily, especially in places where everyone knows everyone. She heard the whispers first. She always did. "They say he won't last. They say she'll break him. They say it won't end well." She did not respond. She had lived with words her whole life. She knew how to let them pass without settling inside her. The rancher heard them too, though later. A comment at the supply store. A pause in conversation when he entered a room. Advice offered without being asked. He listened politely. Then he went back to work. One evening, as the sun dropped low and the sky turned soft orange, they sat near a small fire, sharing a simple meal. The day had been long but satisfying. The land had cooperated. The animals were settled. She stared into the fire for a long time before speaking. "People talk," she said quietly. He nodded. "They always do. They always have," she added. He looked at her then, really looked, not at her height, not at her strength, but at the weight she carried calmly every day. "I don't mind," he said. "What they say." She studied him as if measuring not his words but the space behind them. "Most people do," she replied. "I've learned," he said slowly, "that land teaches you what matters. Noise fades. What lasts is what you build." She said nothing, but something in her eased. That night she told him a little about her past, not everything, just enough, about growing up different, about being watched, about learning early that fitting in was not always possible or even desirable. He did not interrupt. He did not offer solutions. He simply listened. When she finished, the fire had burned low. "You were never too much," he said finally. "The world just wasn't built to understand you." She looked away, not because she disagreed, but because hearing it said out loud felt heavier than expected. From that moment on, trust deepened. They still worked hard, still spoke simply, still gave each other space. But now there was understanding beneath every shared task. The land responded to that understanding. Work went smoother. Problems were solved before they grew. Decisions were made together without struggle. Then came the incident that tested everything. One afternoon, a dispute broke out over land boundaries. Old lines, unclear markings, long-standing tension. Voices rose. Accusations followed. She was blamed first, as she often was. Her presence made people uncomfortable, and discomfort sought a target. She stood her ground calmly, explaining facts, pointing to evidence. Some listened. Others did not want to. The rancher stepped forward, not loudly, not aggressively, but firmly. He supported her words with reason, with knowledge of the land, with steady confidence. It surprised people. They were used to seeing her stand alone. The dispute ended without violence, but not without consequence. Lines were drawn, not just on land, but in minds. That evening she expected distance. That was what usually followed conflict. Instead, he showed up as usual, tools in hand, ready to work. "You didn't have to," she said. "Yes," he replied, "I did." She nodded, accepting that answer. As night fell, she realized something had changed again. Not the world, not the people, but her own expectations. For the first time, she did not feel like strength meant standing alone. And for the rancher, standing beside her felt not like a challenge, but like the most natural thing in the world. The land lay quiet under the stars, holding their footsteps, their work, their growing bond. No promises spoken, no labels given, just two lives moving forward together, steady as the earth beneath them. The days after the land dispute were heavier than before. Nothing dramatic happened right away, but the air felt different. Conversations in town became shorter. Smiles felt forced. People watched more closely. It was not open conflict, but it was not peace either. It was the quiet kind of judgment that settles in slowly, like dust on everything. She noticed it when she went into town for supplies. The clerk who once greeted her now avoided eye contact. A group near the counter fell silent as she passed. She did not react. She had lived with this kind of distance her whole life. Still, this time it felt sharper because now someone else was being pulled into it. The rancher felt it too. Friends he had begun to know offered advice he did not ask for. "Be careful," they said. "You don't want trouble." Some spoke kindly, others with warning in their voices. A few were more direct, questioning his choices as if they were mistakes. He listened, thanked them, and went back to his ranch. He did not bring these things to her right away. He did not want to add weight to what she already carried. Instead, he showed up as he always had. He worked. He listened. He stayed steady, but the pressure did not fade. It grew. One afternoon, a problem arose that could not be ignored. A shared water source that served several nearby lands began to fail. The flow slowed to a trickle. Tension rose immediately. Water was life here. Without it, nothing survived for long. Meetings were called. Voices were raised. Blame moved quickly, landing where it always seemed to land on her. She's been using more than her share. She's changed the land. She's too close to the source. The claims were spoken with confidence, even though there was little proof. Fear made people careless with truth. She stood before them, calm but tired. She explained what she knew. She showed records. She pointed out the drought patterns. Some listened. Many did not. The rancher stood with her again. He spoke clearly, calmly, backing her words with his own observations. He offered solutions instead of arguments. Repair plans, shared labor, temporary adjustments. Still, doubt lingered. The meeting ended without resolution. Everyone left uneasy. That night she returned home later than usual. The weight of the day settled into her shoulders. She sat alone, staring at the dark land beyond her door. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to discouragement. She had always been strong. She had always endured, but strength, she was learning, did not mean she was untouched. The rancher arrived not long after, sensing something was wrong. He did not speak at first. He sat nearby, letting silence do what words could not. "They won't stop," she said finally. "They never do," he nodded. "People are afraid." "I know," she replied, "but fear doesn't excuse harm." "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." They sat there, listening to the night. Wind moved through dry grass. Somewhere an animal called out. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "I wonder if it would be easier to leave." The word surprised even her. He turned to look at her. "Do you want to?" She thought for a long moment. "No," she said. "This land is part of me." "Then we'll face it," he replied simply. Not long after, the crisis deepened. The water source dropped further. Livestock grew restless. Crops suffered. Urgency replaced caution. One early morning, before the sun had fully risen, she noticed something wrong near the water line. The ground had shifted. A section had collapsed inward, blocking the natural flow. It was not sabotage, as some had claimed. It was age, pressure, and drought working together. She called for help immediately. The rancher came first. Then others followed. Some came ready to argue. Others came ready to work. She took charge without raising her voice. She assigned tasks based on skill, not opinion. She moved heavy stones, directed placement, stabilized weak ground. The rancher worked beside her, matching her pace, reinforcing where needed. Hours passed. The sun climbed, sweat soaked through clothes, muscles burned. Slowly the water began to move again. It was not perfect, but it was flowing. People stood back, watching. Some looked relieved, others looked uncertain. A few looked ashamed. No one spoke for a while. Finally, an elder stepped forward. He studied the repaired line, then looked at her. "You were right," he said. "We were wrong." It was not a loud apology. It was not dramatic, but it mattered. The days that followed were quieter, not suddenly friendly, but less tense. The worst accusations faded. Work resumed, yet the cost lingered. The effort of the repair had taken its toll on her. She pushed herself harder than usual, ignoring the signs of exhaustion. One evening, as she returned home, dizziness caught her off guard. She steadied herself against the door, breathing slowly until the world settled. The rancher noticed the next day. Her movements were slower, her focus strained. "You need rest," he said. "I'll be fine," she replied. He did not argue. He simply adjusted the workload, taking on more without making it obvious. That night, a storm rolled in again, fast and hard. Wind tore at structures. Rain hammered the land. A section of her roof gave way, weakened from age and strain. She climbed up despite the weather, determined to fix it before damage spread. The rancher followed when he saw the light from her place. Together, in the storm, they worked to secure the damage. The wind pushed hard. Rain blinded. The ground was slick. At one point, she lost her footing slightly. He reacted instantly, steadying her without force, without panic. For a brief moment, they stood close, rain pouring around them, breathing hard. "Careful," he said softly. She nodded. They finished the work soaked and exhausted, but safe. Inside, warmth returned slowly. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. He sat nearby, silent, watchful. "You didn't have to come," she said. "Yes," he replied again. "I did." She looked at him, then really looked. At the lines of worry he tried to hide, at the steadiness that never demanded anything from her. "You've taken on more than you expected," she said. "So have you," he answered. They shared a small smile, not joyful, but real. That night marked a turning point. Not because everything was suddenly easy, but because something had been proven. When pressure came, when the land tested them, when people doubted, they did not step away. They stood. The world outside remained uncertain. Opinions did not change overnight. But inside that quiet space, something solid had formed. Trust, tested and held. And as the storm passed and the land breathed again, both of them knew that whatever came next would demand even more, but they would not face it alone. The days after the storm felt calmer, as if the land itself had decided to rest. The air was clearer. The ground held moisture instead of dust. The animals moved more easily, sensing the change. Life did not suddenly become perfect, but it became steadier. She recovered slowly. She did not stop working completely, but she learned to pace herself. The rancher stayed close, not watching over her in a way that felt controlling, but present enough that she did not feel alone. They worked side by side as they always had, adjusting to what the land asked of them each day. Word spread quietly about the water repair. People talked less about blame and more about what had been done. Some began to greet her again. Not warmly, not fully, but with respect. It was not an apology, but it was progress. The rancher noticed the shift too. Conversations softened. Advice turned into questions. People asked how the repairs had been done. They listened to his answers because they trusted him, and because he trusted her. One afternoon, a small gathering formed near the shared water source. It was not planned, but people arrived one by one. An elder spoke again, this time to everyone. "This land does not belong to one person," he said. "It belongs to those who care for it." He looked at her as he spoke. Others followed his gaze. No one clapped. No one made a speech, but something settled into place. Later that evening, she and the rancher walked the boundary lines together, checking markers, reinforcing weak spots. The sun was low, painting the land in gold and shadow. "You could have left," he said quietly. "Many would have," she nodded. "I thought about it." "What made you stay?" She stopped walking and looked out across the open ground. "Because running would have meant they were right," she said. "And they were," he smiled slightly. "No," he agreed. "They weren't." They continued walking, comfortable in the silence. As time passed, their lives became more closely connected. Not through sudden change, but through shared responsibility. When something needed fixing, they fixed it together. When a decision needed making, they talked it through. There were disagreements sometimes, but they were handled calmly, without power struggles. People noticed how they worked together. There was no competition, no need to lead or follow, just balance. Some men still whispered that no one could handle her. The words no longer held power. She knew the truth now. She was not someone to be handled. She was someone to be respected. The rancher never tried to change her. He never asked her to be smaller, quieter, or different. He did not praise her strength like a trophy, nor fear it like a threat. He simply accepted it as part of who she was. In return, she saw his steadiness, his willingness to stand firm without being loud, his patience with the land, with people, with life itself. She trusted him not because he promised anything, but because his actions never shifted with pressure. One evening after a long day, they sat outside again, watching the sky fill with stars. The land was quiet, settled. "I don't need saving," she said suddenly, not looking at him. "I know," he replied. "I don't need to be managed." "I know that too." She turned to him then. "Why are you here?" He thought for a moment. "Because this feels right," he said. "Because standing beside you doesn't take anything away from me." She considered his words carefully. Then she nodded. That was enough. Seasons changed. The land healed slowly. Crops grew stronger. Animals thrived. The shared water source held steady. The town adjusted as towns always do. Stories changed tone. What once sounded like warning became history. People spoke of the tall Apache woman with respect now, sometimes even pride. Not because she had softened, but because she had stood firm. And the rancher, he was no longer seen as someone who dared to approach her. He was seen as someone who understood her. Together, they built something lasting. Not just fences and repairs, but trust. Not just shared work, but shared purpose. There was no grand announcement, no moment where everything suddenly made sense. Life simply continued, better than before. She still walked tall, still spoke when needed and stayed silent when not. She still carried the weight of her past, but it no longer pressed so hard. He still rose early, worked until his hands ached, and listened more than he spoke. He still respected the land as something living, not owned, and the land held them both. In the end, the story was not about a woman no man could handle. It was about a woman who never needed handling at all, and a rancher who understood that the strongest bond is not built on control, but on standing side by side, equal, steady, and unafraid.